First of all, he was a gentleman, and he was kindly. That doesn't mean he was a pussycat. He could be very formidable, and having witnessed a couple of his committee hearings when he was chairman of Appropriations Committee, he could be tough as nails. But in general, in his manner, was accommodating. People loved him.
Warren G. Magnuson, known as Maggie to his constituents and colleagues, represented Washington in the U.S. Senate for 36 years. A New Deal Democrat from start to finish, Magnuson used his considerable power and influence for an astounding list of accomplishments in areas of human rights, health care, consumer and environmental protection, and even international relations. He appropriated huge amounts of federal funds for projects in Washington.
He was an orphan, and apparently he never really knew his real parents. And he was adopted, and he adored his adopted family. And in retrospect, I think it probably obviously had a profound effect on him, one way or the other. In this case, I think for the better. It made him more cognizant of the ordinary people's troubles that they can have. He was a very sensitive man.
Magnuson enrolled at the University of Washington in 1925 and then went on to the School of Law. His charm, his striking good looks, and his love of people made him a natural for politics. Throughout his career, Maggie made many friends and very few enemies.
His rule, which is as good a rule as there is in American politics, is that the man who's your enemy today on a given issue might very well be your friend day after tomorrow on another issue. Therefore, you don't antagonize people.
I don't have any feud with any senator because he didn't agree with me last week on something. Some senators, I think, get into feuds. So one of them won't do something for the other one because last week they had a fight and he didn't support him in that. And I always think tomorrow's another day. Let's start all over again when you lose.
A man about town, a man of the people, an amateur painter, a naval officer in World War II, and a friend of many presidents, Maggie seamlessly bridged the gap between the common man and the leaders of the world. Warm, easy, and full of fun, Magnuson won the hearts of millions.
He had a real strong conviction that his ultimate political strength came not from the establishment, but from the guy in the street. And he was never going to be Senator Magnuson. He was going to be Magnuson, or Maggie, or Warren. He was never going to talk above anybody. And he was always going to be the kind of guy that fellow sitting there drinking beer in his underwear, watching TV, could say, you know, I like that guy. He's just like me. He understands me, but he knows how to get things done.
What can you offer the voters of Washington?
Magnuson's greatest ambition was to serve in the Senate. He worked hard behind the scenes, something he called kitchen work, and never cared for pomp and circumstance.
When I first came to the House, way back, Sam Rayburn called me in one time and he said, young man, he said, this is a great body, this House is. He said, people come and go, but he said there are two kinds of congressmen, members of the House he's talking about. He said, one is the workhorses and the other the show horses. And he said, you'll find that the workhorses stay here longer than the show horses.
A workhorse was a guy who kept his head down. He didn't have to get on TV every night or be on the nightly news or the daily news, anything like that. He went to the committee meetings, he did the staff work, he got the staff, he did the work, and he came in and passed legislation. And I'm sure he certainly wanted to be a workhorse, and by all means he was. I mean, he did the work.
Warren Magnuson would have to plead guilty to have been not only brought home the pork, he brought home the hog.
Magnuson forever changed Washington State. Thanks to his efforts, 8 federally subsidized dams were built on the Columbia River, providing public hydroelectric power and irrigating the arid land.
Most members of the Senate, as you can already judge, have developed the art of speaking with precision and clarity and force. The secret of Senator Magnuson's meteoric senator career has been the reverse. He may make clear speeches to you on great public questions, but in Washington he speaks in the Senate so quietly that few can hear him. He looks down at his desk. He comes into the Senate late in the afternoon. He is very hesitant about interrupting other members of the Senate. When he rises to speak, most members of the Senate have left. He sends his messages up to the Senate. Everyone says, "What is it?" And Senator Magnuson said, "Well, it's nothing important." And Grand Coulee Dam is built.
I think nothing is more significant than the construction of the Columbia River dams, which gave us cheap electricity, which we managed to pretty much hang on to this day. And cheap electricity meant simply the industrialization of the state, especially the western part of the state. And it also meant irrigation for the eastern part of the state. And that flowed out of the dam construction.
During his tenure, while always working closely with fellow Senator Henry Scoop Jackson, Magnuson secured funds for Washington roads and disaster relief after Mount St. Helens erupted. He also promoted contracts for the state's leading employers.
Well, sort of an afterthought, he said, I can remember, he said, "Well, I have a little amendment here." And he said, "It's not really very much. I'd like to move its adoption, $900 million for Mount St. Helens. Any objection?" Just sort of a little afterthought, and we had about $1 billion for Mount St. Helens. There had been no testimony, there had been no justification, there had been no description of how it would be used, but it was just sort of a little old amendment.
Maggie and Scoop, though they were very different people, held each other in high esteem.
They looked on each other with great affection, and they worked together very well for the good of the state, good of the country.
Magnuson fought tirelessly for what he believed was right and good for the average man.
With the Republican philosophy, the old guard trickle-down theory that seems to have Mr. Eisenhower captive. That theory proposes that if you put enough prosperity upon the people at the top of the economic ladder, it's bound to filter down to the rest of us. It's somewhat like feeding the horse, hoping the sparrows will get along.
It's dangerous to make him too parochial a figure. He was a major national and international figure. And bringing home the bacon, which he did supremely well, was not the most important of his contributions to his state or his nation.
Magnuson's reach extended well beyond Washington state. He initiated major increases in spending on health care and research, and predated Ralph Nader on consumer protection legislation. Everything from human rights to the environment benefited from his efforts.
I would say that his greatest contribution, not with all the good works, the Seattle Center, the dams, the cheap electricity, his greatest accomplishment was the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. Maggie got it through the Senate, and it was not an easy piece of legislation. There was a tremendous opposition to it, and he overcame it and he got it. And this country has not been the same since then.
Magnuson even had a hand in international relations, working to establish trade with China.
At a time when we were regarding Red China as the worst thing this side of the communist threat to American democracy and the Soviet Union, Senator Magnuson was still outspoken about the need to trade with China. And he stuck to that and through the 1950s. And eventually it paid off. And we had, oddly enough, the great breakthrough on it wasn't Warren Magnuson. He was the great force behind it in the Senate, but President Nixon, who was not known to be charitable to Reds of any kind, Chinese, Soviet, or American, made the great breakthrough by going over there.
Happened that Nixon and Kissinger wanted to take the spotlight on the thing, and I'm glad they did. And the Chinese are great for protocol too. They naturally going to listen to the President of the United States, wanting him to come over, if he wanted to come over, before they listened to a member of the Senate.
He had the clout of being the chairman of two of the most powerful committees in the Senate. He had the know-how, the skill, tactical and strategic, for employing that power, and he had these bright, able young men, and I must say that with some bias, I regard all of them as friends, who were able to execute what he wanted.
Whether it was playing poker with Harry Truman or having Lyndon Johnson as the best man at his wedding to his wife Germaine, Maggie became fast friends with presidents from Roosevelt to Kennedy.
His relations with presidents were very close, let's put it that way, beginning with President Roosevelt. He was a great poker player. He played poker with President Roosevelt, played poker with President Truman. Jack Kennedy, again, a close connection there, and I think he kind of looked on President Kennedy, or Jack Kennedy in the Senate, as sort of a little brother relationship, quite close. The President Johnson was the only president I ever heard Senator Magnuson refer to by his first name. He called him Lyndon, which is most unusual. I mean, the protocol says that if a man's a president, you call him Mr. President, even if you're a senator and you grew up with him. His relations with Nixon were, as far as I can tell, almost nil. Maggie knew how to pick him.
His staff, known affectionately as the Bumblebees, was known throughout Washington, D.C. as a staff that got things done. Magnuson's leadership, his ability to delegate and trust his staff, won him lifelong devotion.
He had all these bright, able people humming about and working on the various committees, appropriations, commerce. They adored him, and he adored them.
His wife, Germaine, worked tirelessly on his behalf.
I know that he trusted her enormously, her brains, her good judgment, in addition to being one hell of a beautiful, charming, and attractive lady.
When Maggie and Scoop and Lyndon Johnson, Richard Russell, and when those people left, that was the end of the era of identifiable giants.
I believe that the state of Washington is, to a great extent, prosperous today in the areas of our national security and defense industries because of Warren Magnuson. I believe that the timber industry and the forest industries are strong today because of Warren Magnuson. I believe that the strength of the hydroelectric system in the state of Washington is as strong as it is today because of Senator Magnuson. I think the consumers, not only in the state of Washington but all over this nation, are protected to a greater extent today because of the work of Senator Magnuson.
The era may have ended, but Magnuson's legacy lives on in the laws that make our lives better, in the projects he established throughout Washington, and in the hearts of those who knew and loved him.